Test. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, there you go. It's recorded.
Oh, I get a notification that I'm being recorded.
Yeah.
So
we want you to opt
good morning,
in.
everyone. Thanks for joining us, and most especially our special guests, Kylie and Sofia, today. I am joined here by my co-founder, Fidesz Santos Aguiles, who is part of the Entrepreneurs, a collective of 6 women here in Melbourne of Filipino heritage. And we're all about celebrating Filipino cuisine, culture, and communities. So the purpose of Coffee and Chikahan, Chikahan, if people are not as familiar with the Tagalog dialect, it means chit-chat, or in the past term, it used to mean gossip, but we changed that up and actually use the power of conversation to actually continue to build our community through conversations to connect, engage, and uplift at this very trying times that we find ourselves in. So today really marks the launch of this series, and we're so happy that we'll have the opportunity to run these as weekly sessions on a Saturday morning with special guests from around the world, and hopefully touching base with some of our folks in the Filipino diaspora in the US, the Philippines, and beyond. And we're looking to really just celebrate and discuss the business and creation of food experiences and the communities and storytelling that comes along with it. So we're so happy that you guys joined us on your Saturday morning. I know schedules are, you know, pretty empty. Joined us for a part of your day, and we're so happy that we've got some amazing women to sort of talk, conversate with. So Fidesz, go ahead.
Amazing. Okay, so before we begin, I just wanted to just run through how the session will go. So basically we'll have the guest introductions, we'll have a series of questions, about 30 minutes of that, and then allow the audience to chime in and provide some questions to our guests ourselves for 15 minutes at the end. So as Nina said, we also have Nina, Christina at the background, as our IT guru, or Zoom guru, should I say. So she's yeah, making sure that everything runs smoothly, but we'll see how we go. Okay, and this is our first Zoom session as well. So if anything goes wrong, it'll be fine. We'll just keep on going. Okay. All right, so we might kickstart with an introduction of our guests. So as Grace said, we're joined today by 2 of, I guess, highly regarded female industry leaders, we would say. We're big fans, obviously. And amazing women in their own right. So thank you again for being with us this morning. We might kickstart with you guys maybe introducing yourselves. And Kylie, you want to go ahead and start first?
Sure. So I'm Kylie Javier-Ashton. I have worked in the hospitality industry for my whole life, and currently not working, but still employed as the GM of Momofuku Seibo restaurant here in Sydney. Like many restaurants, we're closed at the moment, so I've got tons of time on my hands, which is great. I'm also a member of the Grow Assembly, which was founded in Melbourne, and I'm the Sydney coordinator for that. I'm a judge for Appetite for Excellence Awards, and yeah, just really love hospitality to my core. So It's really nice to be a part of this.
Thanks for joining us. And Sophia.
Yeah, I feel funny saying hi. My name's Sofia Levin, but it is. I'm a freelance food and travel journalist, it's a terrible time to be a freelancer right now, and I've probably picked the 2 industries that have been arguably hit the hardest as well. But I wouldn't be anything different given the opportunity. Even now, I've done it my entire working career since about halfway through my university degree. I had my first published piece in the ABC, and ever since then I've been just freelance and love it. Absolutely love it.
Well, we'll love both of your work and your contribution to the hospitality industry. And we know that hospitality, as you say, is one of the biggest sectors that's been impacted by this COVID, as many other sectors are. So we might start off with the first question. You know, obviously.
Oh, before we get started on the first question, since it is Coffee Chikahan.
Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot about that.
Imagine if we were like meeting up at your favorite cafe. What would have been your drink order of choice today?
I would have made you meet me at my local cafe because it's walking distance from me, which is Terra
Ah.
Twilight in Collingwood.
Oh,
And
nice.
I'll usually just get along that black, but if I'm feeling a bit fancy and the weather is warm, they do this amazing coconut cold brew, which I thought as a coffee
Wow.
purist I would absolutely hate, but it's delicious and it comes with little flaky bits on top. So that's what
Oh,
I would have had,
really?
although it's
Cold
about
brew.
16 degrees and raining right now.
Yeah, I
I
know.
still probably would do it just because I haven't had one for ages.
Is that coconut? Is that like coconut milk? And it's cold.
Yeah,
okay.
it's
Yum.
delicious.
Nice.
Gotta try
Like
that next time. And Kylie, what would you order?
Probably a herbal tea. I stopped drinking coffee a little while ago.
Wow.
Yeah, I know,
Mhm.
because I love coffee. You'd have to come to Sydney if you wanted to come for coffee with me. But my favorite cafe is Room 10 in Potts Point, and I mean, I used to drink filter, only filter. I can't drink espresso. But now probably why I had to stop drinking coffee actually.
All right.
Yeah, just a tea.
Tea.
Oh, that's cool.
Well, I've had my
Herbal
coffee
tea.
this morning, and I'm drinking calamansi tea now. So
Oh,
calamansi from
nice.
my yeah. We've got so much in the
good.
backyard, so I'm just making tea from it. All right, awesome. Well, thank you. All right, let's kick off with the first question. So obviously it's a challenging time for everyone right now, but we do need to stay positive. How are you staying positive at this time and taking care of your physical and mental well-being? Yep.
All right, I'll kick it off. I guess I'm just approaching this like it's the school holidays.
Very long school holidays, right?
Yeah. Like, I guess I'm just trying to have as much fun as I can. You know, it's a challenging time because financially there's so much uncertainty. But, you know, having time with my husband for us to both be at home for an extended period of time is such a treat that we've never really had in our whole time of being together for, I don't know, what, 11 years. That we just chill and we, you know, we can wake up when we want to and we don't really have any plans. Like, it's kind of the holiday that we always wanted and needed and never could afford or justify. And the world has kind of like given it to us. So I'm really trying to stay positive. I'm cooking a lot. I'm actually cooking a lot of Filipino food and calling my mom. And yesterday
What's the last dish you cooked? Oh, so, yeah.
Oh, yesterday I made the long torta.
Tortang talong.
Yeah. Tortang talong, and I made chicken asada. The other day.
Oh,
I've just been
okay.
cooking heaps. Been making my husband do TikTok videos with me.
What's your handle?
You're on
What's your
I'm
handle? We'll
literally
follow you.
It's Kylie Javier-Ashton. It's pretty easy.
Okay, cool. There you go for Des. You've got someone to TikTok challenge with.
Yeah, I'm literally pretending like I'm 16 again, have no money in school holidays, and I'm hanging out with my best friend. So it's actually been a great time.
Oh, that's awesome. So I was just listening to one of your old podcasts, maybe a couple of years ago, with the unbearable lightness of being hungry.
Yeah.
During that, you revealed that you were a vegetarian. So it sounds like the layout of food that you're making now, you've gone back to being omnivore, or are you still a vegetarian?
Yeah. No, I have. I started eating meat again at the beginning of last year because I got quite sick as a vegetarian. Yeah, I had really bad iron deficiency and I kind of had no other choice. I went to see my naturopath and she was just like, you need to start eating meat again. And I mean, I've got heaps of friends. Lee Tran Lam, who does that podcast, has been a vegetarian for a really long time. And, you know, I have had some really great conversations with her about food. But ultimately, I kind of had to look after myself, and I'm a bit of an all or nothing person. So the plan was to go back to eating meat a couple of times a week, and
and then it was like,
it kind of didn't happen.
Well done for trying, because Sandra's one of our vegetarian entrepreneurs, and she's always great at sort of like letting us understand, hey, you can still have the Filipino flavors, but here is the alternative to, rather than having tripe in your kare-kare, was it the snow mushrooms or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so she's been really good at opening up our minds, because initially we're like, oh, a vegetarian Filipino, oh, I don't
Yeah, it doesn't
not gonna
exist,
work.
right?
Yeah, but she's really opened up our eyes about what's possible and stuff.
Yeah. All right, awesome. How about you, Sophia? What are you doing to stay positive?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a busy person by nature. I need something to do. So when I'm not traveling or out eating and interviewing people, I'm working from home. So working from home has never been a problem for me. It's not working from home that I find really, really difficult. Being stuck at home. It's the first time in, God, since I can remember, probably since primary school, where I haven't just had a massive to-do list, and it's probably unhealthy. I've always known it's a little bit unhealthy, wanting to cross things off and putting more things on it, even though they might not need to be there. So coming to terms with that has actually been extremely liberating. That being said, I still need to keep busy or I just go insane. So I mean, the couple of times I've been outside, it's been for a run. I've been trying to do yoga with my dog jumping all over me. Jinky, who's named after Jinky Pacquiao.
Oh, Jinky Pacquiao, is that what it is? Oh,
yeah, that's it.
Well, one thing you and Kylie have in common, because you guys have that love of boxing, both your hubbies and yourself.
Yeah. So my husband wanted to call our female toy poodle Manny, and our first son when we have it, and that just wasn't. Compromise was Jinky for the dog. But yeah, so and I've my dad, bless him, bought me these weighted sort of they're not really wraps, they're more like half gloves, so they're 1 kilogram. So you can sort of try and keep your shoulders fit and all of that. So I'll give them a go. And then I've been cooking. I mean, I love cooking, but I'm definitely more of an eater, just because that's where I have to put most of my time for work. So to be able to spend a long time cooking or making a dish that takes a long time, that just wasn't something that previously felt like an option to me. So I've been really enjoying it. So yes, I've started a sourdough starter and all of those things. But, you know, looking for ways to make breakfast from the discard and stuff like that. And then the other thing is working on a personal project, which I've been chipping away at probably for the last year. Which might sound ambitious now, but I truly believe we're all going to need it at the end. It's a culinary travel website, and it's going to be a pretty big deal, I hope. So
my God,
to look forward to. Yeah,
that's so awesome.
I'm just noting that down, Sophia. Culinary.
Yeah.
I'm hoping there's a dot in the Philippines somewhere. Is that what you're thinking for Des?
I'd love to go to the field. So I'm going to hopefully launch it with about 10 or 12 countries, different places I've been over the last couple of years, and
that's awesome.
It's an extension of that Eat Curiously movement, just trying to learn more about other cultures through food, which is just the simplest window to do so.
Actually, I might jump onto that then, because you've mentioned it now. So one of my questions is really around Eat Curiously. So first of all, how did you start off as a food and travel writer, and how did Eat Curiously come about?
Yeah, I mean, I've always had an interest in food, although as my parents remind me, there was a stage when I was about 2 years old where I refused to eat anything but little frankfurts and pads of butter for 2 weeks. So once I got over that, I was always fairly adventurous with eating. And I think being from a Jewish family, even though we're not super orthodox or religious, just coming together around food, similarly to the Filipino culture, the Italian culture, things like that. That probably fired my interest. Always loved writing at school. English was my best subject. I opted in for English language as well. And then around the time when when food blogs were becoming popular, I had one. So timing was great because it gave me something to do. I started it at the very start of university, basically to suck up to my tutor who said, you guys should all have blogs. Blogs are going to be the next big thing. And we were all like, what's a blog? So I started that to try and get a high distinction. I did.
Did you get it? You got it? Yeah.
It was worth it then.
But that ended up going from a really shitty personal diary about everything to writing about Sunday family brunches and cooking, which is what we always did at home. And so by the time I started pitching newspapers, magazines, just sending cold emails, I had a body of work similar to how you would have if you were applying for
artist,
more
like
artistic job. Yeah.
You had a
And I
portfolio
think,
of work, yeah.
exactly. So I could show a bit of knowledge. I could show that I could write, even though I was green. And I think that probably helped me get work and become a freelancer. So that's where oh, and then I went on to study. I studied journalism. I did an honours in journalism as well, which
you just did that, you know, which you totally.
Well, no,
I
guess that's
an honours. Wow,
the thing is there's always this war between bloggers and journalists, and now even the phrase blogger has changed. That just means someone who has an Instagram account now, not somebody who has a blog, which I find really interesting and really struggle to get my head around. But there's always been a war between bloggers, whether that's, you know, WordPress or Instagram, and journalists who were trained. And here I was, this funny, like, next gen food writer who was both, because I've had the training. I've been taught to write for, well, not Fairfax anymore, 9. So it's been really interesting, sort of straddling those worlds for a long time. And then from there, to answer your second question, just from being in a position where I'm lucky to travel a lot growing up, I went overseas regularly, sort of every year or two, because half of my family is in London, mum's side, and my brother's since moved over there. So we would always either go to London to visit my grandparents, and stop somewhere to break up the trip because we were young kids, or meet them somewhere else because they were sick of coming to Melbourne. That was too far, and we were sick of always seeing the same thing. So I was exposed to food from different cultures from a really young age, and I think that probably helped. And then just living in Melbourne, it's just the most amazing opportunity, because unless you're Aboriginal, Indigenous to this land, nobody's really from here. So everyone's food is from somewhere else, and I think we're becoming more and more accepting of that. And for me, it's just like taking a holiday every time I choose to go somewhere for dinner. And I actively try to do that. And maybe it's my personality, or because of this sort of increased exposure, but I love going somewhere I've never been before. I don't want to go back to the same place more than once. I want to try something new, whether I hate it or love it. It's about the experience as much as it is the taste for me. So that sort of led to talking about it in the phrase "eat curiously." And then over the last year, it's just sort of had a bit more traction. I wrote a cover story for Good Food, which was great, and then I was interviewed on radio about it. Lonely Planet asked me to write for them about it, and I think it just resonates. And I think right now it's resonating, especially because we can still eat curiously from home. I mean, you can choose which restaurants you support by going, you know, driving to a local philo place that might still be open for takeaway if you're not Filipino, I should add. And, you know, trying something new, or local Malaysian, or even trying to find something Italian that's not lasagna. It could just be a different shape of pasta. That still counts to me. It doesn't have to be tried.
Yeah. Amazing. What an amazing career so far. And we're very excited about your new initiative. So looking forward to seeing that. And so over to you, Kylie. Obviously, you've had a really solid career in hospitality, and you want to share some of how you started and where you're at?
Yeah, sure. So I studied acting, hence why I ended up being a waitress.
Okay. Yes.
Well, I did performing arts, so I kind of really didn't have much direction when I left school as to what I wanted to do, and I just kind of really loved like entertaining people. So I went and studied performing arts, and ended up in hospitality as just a way of living. And then I was mainly in bars before that. I then landed myself a job at Tetsuya's, which at the time was like the best restaurant in Australia.
Wow, yeah.
And it just kind of changed my life. Like, being around food, I've always loved food, but I just never really thought of it as a career choice. Like, it wasn't really something that I thought I could do, because I didn't want to be a chef per se. I didn't think that there was any other real kind of career path. But then when
I like that in retail and hospitality, right? Because you think, you know, being a waiter or a retail assistant is a you know, sort of in between the real job, you know.
For sure.
But you can actually, and you're a great example of that, because you've built such a great career. Sorry for interrupting, but I just wanted to sort of mention.
No, you're right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I totally did think about it like that. And when I went to Tetsuya's, because it was such a highly regarded restaurant and everybody there were career waiters, I immediately fell in love, and I just felt like I was at home. It was like the first job that I ever had that I was actually proud to say what I did. You know, I was like really proud of it, and I could be myself, and it just kind of combined all those elements of entertaining people, which is sort of what I love to do. I really hated acting in terms of as an industry. I just couldn't stand auditioning and like the feeling of constantly being judged. Like it was terrible. You know, and especially like back then, that was what, like maybe 15, 16 years ago. There wasn't really any...
There's Jinky for you.
There's Jinky.
Hey, Jinky.
Somebody walked past and she wasn't happy about it. And sorry to interrupt.
No, you're right. Yeah, like 15, 16 years ago, there weren't any Asians represented on.
That's what I was going to ask you. Were there any
Australian
women of colour kind of roles at that time? So
no, I remember like the point where like I kind of broke down. This is like totally besides the point, but I had an agent and they sent me for this audition for Phantom of the Opera. Like I was like, where are the Asians in Phantom of the Opera? Like this is ridiculous. I'm not even a singer. Like. And I felt so humiliated. I remember like after my audition, I sat in the gutter and I sobbed. I was so embarrassed. I was like, what am I doing here? And
what part were they offering you though? What part?
It was just for like the ensemble.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It was just an open audition, cattle call, like that. You know, like this guy was just sending me just fucking get me out of his hair, you know, like.
Yeah, right.
But I just remember like that was the point where I was like, what am I doing? Like, this is not healthy. Like, and I'm not happy. So, ended up in restaurants and just felt like I was accepted and at home and I could be myself. And that was really liberating. So yeah, from there I continued to work at Tetsuya's for a while. I did a stage in the kitchen just so I could get as much experience as I could. Then I went to work at the Bentley restaurant and bar back when I was in Surrey Hills. And then from there I was part of this a collective called Boys, which is Taste of Young Sydney. And that was sort of one of the first young chef movements in Sydney, and now like all of those guys are pretty established. There's, you know, Morgan McGlone, Darren Robertson, Mitch Moore, Adriana Zumbo, Dan Hong. And we used to put on dinners every few months, which was super fun because it was just like whatever we wanted to do. And none of us were really in leadership positions at that time. We were all just like punks, which is really like fun. And then, we opened up a restaurant called Duke Bistro. We had that for a year. And then I got a job at my job at Momofuku. So I've been at Momo now for 8 years.
Oh, that's fabulous.
Yeah, I love it. It's my home.
And may I ask, because you obviously sort of went into the foray of a career path that, you know, many of our Filipino parents would have been like, what? Ano? What are you going to do?
You're not being a nurse or a lawyer or an accountant.
Can you please elaborate how it was to sort of navigate that conversation with them? Look, I'm going to become an actor or actress, then go into hospo and stuff. Like, what was that like in terms of that conversation?
To be honest, like my parents are the most easygoing people. Actually, my dad like keeps on, he's like video calling me right now. I'm like, Dad, go away. But they have always been incredibly supportive of whatever I do. They've never ever questioned. Like they never sit down with me and be like, okay, what are you doing, Kylie? What are you doing with your life? They've always been super supportive, and just like, you know, I think that that's sort of the greatest thing about my parents. They're probably like my biggest role models because they're so humble. My mum her family was squatters in the Philippines, and she's got she's the eldest of 11 siblings. My dad has 7 in his family. He comes from a tiny fishing village, and he was the second youngest, but he couldn't fish. So they had to pool all their family's money and send him to school because he had no use in this tiny fishing village.
Village, yeah.
And so he went to Manila, or they're from Bulacan. He's from a tiny island called Malolos, and so he went to Bulacan, which is like on the main island, to study. They basically pulled all the resources from their whole family and sent my dad to school because he couldn't fish. And from there, when the Australian government in the 70s needed tradespeople, sponsored all these Asians to come over. And so my mum and dad were part of that that flow of immigrants coming from the 70s. So, you know, like they come from super humble beginnings, and I think that they have always just wanted me to be a good person, and have never really made me feel like I need to pay them back for anything, or prove that like this life is like that I need to sort of create this better life. As long as I'm happy and healthy and I'm a good person, that for me, them is there.
Where's Wally? Where's Raph?
Raph, I'm alive.
This is so good.
It's so cute. Hi.
He's all dressed up. It's like, where's Wally?
Yeah, where's Wally pajamas?
Yeah.
He just
But I guess it would be remiss for us not to sort of like thank all those people that are on the front lines right now in the medical field, as well as all the people that became nurses because they followed their parents' requirements. You got to be a nurse, which is a traditional in our Filipino parents.
That's my mother-in-law. She moved to Australia to be a nurse. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure she came from the same place as her dad.
Really?
I've just sent her a message to check, but I feel like, cause, and then she said something that sounds like lololos. Malolos.
Okay.
So I think that's which would be weird.
There you go.
I'll let you know.
It's possible. It is very possible.
Teachers, engineers, right? That's
a
trio.
Yeah,
that's right.
Oh yeah, exactly. And those are the frontline people, the essentials, the essential workers that we need right now to help us get through this.
Well, I think,
everyone has a pita that's a nurse.
Yeah, everyone has a pita that's a nurse. That's for sure. But I think it's maybe a great segue to talk about, how with hospo becoming in hiatus right now, we're seeing a lot of restaurateurs or sort of like food businesses. I know the word pivot is a one that you cringe at, Sophia.
Oh.
I know you hate the word pivot, but I'll use it in this context.
That's all right. It's become a cliche because it's real. That's fine.
Yeah, I know.
It reminds me of like netball, when you pivot a ball, like you're changing direction. I guess that's what we mean, right? So,
yeah. So we've seen a couple of restaurants actually go down that path of sort of like providing meals, ready-made meals for those in the front lines, those that are working in medical fields that aren't able to cook for themselves and, sustain and nourish themselves where they're battling what is right now like a crisis with our COVID infections and so forth. I guess for us, like talk us through what you've seen to be a successful sort of deviation that someone has gone, or like some restaurants that have gone a different path that you feel has been something that is worth still exploring. Because I would suspect there'd be a couple of people on this call, perhaps food operators themselves, trying to figure out, okay, what do I do? Do I keep things closed? Do I think about an alternate way to connect with my suppliers, to my community? You've seen work well, and what do you think is some, worthy of a, discussion or exploration in that area?
I think probably the first thing to sort of clarify there is that how people define worthy. So I feel like the way that hospitality businesses are running at the moment is one of two things. One, it's to stay open and just keep feeding people. Two, it's just to keep their staff employed. Other than that, nobody's doing it to make money. Everybody's probably losing money, I would say. I'm not sure of anybody who would be bringing in a bunch of cash right now, because people don't spend money on takeaway the same way they spend money on dining out. So it needs to change if restaurants were to survive in the same form. So I think what's important to acknowledge is that the reasons why people are choosing to pivot, which is, produce doesn't go to waste. They can support the farmers, or they can support their staff, and everybody's really thinking about other people in this time, which I think is pretty amazing.
Kylie, did you have any thoughts on that?
It's a hard one, to be honest. The costs of running a business in hospitality are immense. You know, our profit margins, if you're lucky, will, you know, are 10%. And in any other business, that's crazy. Like we work in the business of people. So, you know, more than anything, for me, hospitality is not about food or beverage. It's about people. So when you have that disconnection from the food and beverage, you know, like, once you have that disconnection and you don't have the people there, you kind of don't have a business. And like Sophia said, like the people who are still operating are there because of other reasons rather than to try to keep their business afloat. They're just trying to keep people employed. And so, you know, there's so much uncertainty right now that for us as a business, like it just made sense that we needed to close so that our team could get benefits from the government, that we could salvage some kind of business. Like, I think that, you know, we are so focused on what is happening right now, and you know, everyone needs to pay rent, everyone needs to like stay alive and survive, which is, you know, the most important thing I think that everyone needs to just sort of focus on right now. So I think that we do forget that there is going to be another side to this. And you know, I think that what we're encouraging our team to do is just, you know, really use this time to take care of themselves, make sure that they use this time sensibly. So, you know, take care of your mental health, do all those things that you don't normally have time to do, because on the other side of this, when that comes, we're going to need people. We're going to need people who are happy, who are healthy, who have realigned their priorities, who are committed to what they're going to be doing going forward. And so like this time, even though there's a lot of uncertainty, some businesses are completely shut, a lot of businesses are completely shut. It doesn't mean that things aren't happening within those communities, you know. And I think that a period of dormancy, whilst it's really scary, is natural in all living beings. And sometimes we kind of have to just accept that and try to like just be sort of in the present and in the moment, and not try to come up with 1,000 solutions, because we just, for me personally, I know that I just don't have those answers right now.
It's interesting because it's the places that I feel are best positioned to stay open in some way right now are the ones who have incredible brand awareness. So you look at places like CHIKAHAN, who are doing takeaway. I was looking at Chris Lucas's Instagram, something came up that they're now doing things in Melbourne, CHIKAHAN takeaway things from 3 different locations, which makes me think maybe they've changed their other businesses to the CHIKAHAN model, because people are actually buying it. It's the ones in the middle who might not be as well known who are going to struggle, because they've got a bunch of staff. I'm like a really, really little guy who might be able to tell his family to just go home for the time being, because you're just relying on, you know, family workforce, friendly workforce, that kind of thing. And yeah, I mean, who knows what Momofuku would have been able to do, but that to me is such a brave decision to be like, right, we're going to hibernate for now, because you could argue that Momofuku has amazing brand awareness. People love the brand, they know the chefs, they know the people behind it. So to sort of lead in that way by saying, right, we think the best way to look after our people is actually to just close, and that's going to give us the best chance later, is really ballsy.
Yeah, it is.
And so we were speaking to Jem Jacinto, so he's the owner of Fin Pokey and Daily Greens in Sydney and Queensland as well. And he's saying, so he was saying how he's using this time to focus on aspects of the business that he's always just put, you know,
to the side,
aside. So
like all the unsexy stuff, like documentation of processes, you know, onboarding of employees so that they're engaged and are part of the culture and community when they do come and serve as part of Daily Greens and so forth. So
And we did ask him, you know, are you planning during this time to plan your opening in Melbourne? So watch that space, but hopefully soon. But yeah, I mean, that's it's just, you touched on small business versus, you know, bigger businesses that have a strong brand. I think one of the advantages of small businesses, and I work with a lot of small businesses, is that they can, they're more agile, and they can sort of, I guess, change tact, because they're not sort of bogged down with so many systems and so forth, right? So they can sort of be a bit more flexible and just rethink and reset and review where potentially they could further grow. But, you know, a lot of them do need some guidance, and I know that Jem also mentioned this, but they do need some guidance. And so I wanted to sort of, Kylie, ask you around, has there been sort of any, I guess, conversations around how Grow Assembly can potentially play a role potentially in providing some guidance to these small businesses, either online or whatever? So,
but I think this whole crisis has developed so quickly that it's kind of caught everybody a little bit off guard.
Yeah.
And right now, we're kind of we've sort of accepted what our new normal is, and this is a time that we're all sort of regrouping. When this first started happening and we saw restaurants closing left, right and centre, you might have seen that Mayura and Banjo were doing the gift voucher thing, where they were like buying gift vouchers, which is fantastic. You know, like I think everyone was just kind of just trying to do whatever they could to help salvage this big problem. Now we can understand that the scope of it is so much bigger and the ramifications are so much greater. Community and things like this are the most important part during a time like this. And so, you know, we don't have any real specific plans about what Grow Assembly is going to do going forward, or, you know, what we can implement. But they're things that we're definitely thinking about. And, you know, like you guys are saying, it's like all the things that you just kind of don't have time to do. Like, and I know, coming from having a small business ourselves, like running a small business and having finance, you know, really looking at your finances, very few people do that properly. Very few people, unless they're forced to. And I think that this is a time for us to really like re-look at all of the things that we're probably neglecting within our businesses. You know, SOPs, my training manual that I send to all my staff, like it's something that I like quickly update as soon as someone's coming on board. But this is the time where I can actually like cull the whole thing, really look at it going forward and be like, I can spend time on this and spend time on like what I want to get out of my people, what my expectations are, really think about that and put them all in writing. And I think that, you know, having that that dialogue with people is so important. We kind of just assume we're like, we get stuck in this like busyness, that you kind of assume that communication goes out, but really, like most of the time it doesn't. It's just sort of in your own head. And this is an opportunity for you to really, for us to all sit down and really think about what our priorities are for our own businesses, for ourselves, and make sure that that's aligned, and come up with some clear ideas about what that are. Like thinking about what your values are. Like I know that we wrote a mission statement and our values for the restaurant probably 4 or 5 years ago when Paul first got here, but we haven't really looked at that again. It's like that's changed. But we haven't had the time. So thinking about like what's important to you, what do you want out of this business, where do you see it going, even though we don't really know what the future holds. Like I think that this is a time as good as any to really think about what's important for you and why you're doing what you're doing. And if anything, those values are going to come out so much stronger at the other end of this, you know, rather than just being like, I've got to put something together. Now we're really going to know what is important to us, because it's all become so real.
Totally.
That's right.
Totally. That's amazing. Okay, so I'm just looking at the time. It's 10:40. We might even just start to open up Q&A. You think? we've got any questions coming through, please send them through and we'll address them. While we wait for that to come through. Listen to me, I sound like I'm on a podcast where I sound like I know what I'm doing. But anyway, one of the questions that we did put forward to both of you is, and we may have touched on it already, but and having that uncertainty, not knowing when we actually are going to get to the other side. You hear a lot of the government referencing about this building a bridge and getting to the other side. From your perspective though, like how does that even look like? And if you can sort of just reimagine the industry, what would you like to see and what would you like to remain? Because there'll obviously be a lot of changes that'll be made and that'll happen. But what would you like to see at the end? How would you like to, what would you like to see and what would you like to remain? In particular, hospitality within Melbourne as well as Sydney.
I've seen quite a few fine dining chefs having a lot of fun cooking home meals. And I don't know, it'd be nice, I think, if people could still find that joy when they're not forced to find it as well.
Yep.
And I don't know what that would look like in that setting. I think there'll be some businesses that pop up or some offshoots of businesses, maybe, maybe it's, I don't know, well, let's use Momofuku as an example, and it's Momofuku at home, and that's separate from the restaurant but has the branding, and sure, people can pick up a lasagna pack or whatever it is and still feel like they're involved in a brand that might not have previously been accessible to them. So I think that accessibility of dining, even if it's a different offering, would be great. If that could remain, that would be amazing. But by the same token, what would also be good on the other end of the scale, if people, having been stuck at home this whole time, have a greater appreciation of food and dining out and are willing to actually pay what it's worth, rather than having to pinch pennies and have that tiny margin on food. So I think realistically that gap between fine dining and casual dining will probably be a lot greater. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think it probably should have happened a while ago, because businesses need margins to survive, and the margins in hospitality, once you pay, a third on staff, a third on running costs, and a third on food, there's nothing left for profit at the end of that.
Well, probably like 10% is a good benchmark, right?
Yeah, and I think 5% is probably
more realistic.
Oh wow, that's good to know. That's more the reality. 5% is more the reality.
Yeah, definitely.
And then 100% hopefully no other business would run on those margins.
Yeah, that's right. And like I guess that's what the underlying foundation of what hospo is. It's a connection to the people, right? And when you do have that connection, it offsets that small margin that you otherwise get, put into the bank and stuff. It's that formation of that community and the ongoing conversation with that community through food.
Okay, I've got a few questions. I've got the chat open and the Q&A. So let's start with Angelo Labrador, to all the panelists and attendees. As a small business during this time, we're using it to build a stronger connection with our audience and followers. Oh, sorry, that was a comment. Thanks for that, Angelo. One question from Christina from TEP, because she also does, she also works in the hospitality as well. This is for Kylie, what was your favorite dish on the menu from Tets? And what sort of food would you have for your staff meals?
My favorite dish at Ted's, well, I mean, the thing is that we didn't really ever get to eat the actual food from Ted's.
Oh, that's so unfair.
Well, like food costs. You've got to.
Yeah, that's true.
The funny thing is I can't eat pink fish anymore, so I can't eat salmon or trout, because we had ocean trout like pretty much every day for dinner.
Oh, you poor
we
thing.
have all the offcuts. It wasn't like I know, I sound like a fool.
No. It wasn't the pretty bit.
It was steamed with like rice, which is nice. But when you've had that like every single day in so many ways, we were kind of like, okay, can we eat something else now? But the actual ocean trout dish, because it was cooked, it was like the slow confit ocean trout was pretty amazing. Kes also did this Wagyu beef that was like really thin, rolled with like a ponzu dressing and wasabi. That was pretty delicious. the Flowers chocolate cake was also really good because I used to get the offcuts of that. Like, I mean, his food is so classic, and I think that Japanese philosophy of just perfecting one thing, it was so ahead of its time. I think it's such an underrated restaurant even now because they just do what they do, and I think it's something that is totally undervalued in our culture. But it's such a Japanese thing, and it's so beautiful. It takes a lot of patience and confidence, I think, to be able to just stick to one thing and perfect that. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. Okay. Another one for both of you. If everywhere was to reopen tomorrow, where would you go for? It says here beast, but I think she meant breakfast. Where would you go for breakfast, lunch, and dinner?
That's a good one.
I'd go straight to Yum Cha for breakfast.
Oh, there you go.
Yum Cha for breakfast?
Well, brunch, you know, the 10, 11 I'm sitting.
Oh, yeah,
because that is something that you cannot replicate at home, even if you try. You can spread shit out everywhere, but it's just not the same. And I quite like that brusque service that, you know, do you want this? Throw it on the table, cross something off on a little piece of paper. And it's such an adventure going to Yum Cha because you sort of know exactly what's coming, but you have no idea what order it is either.
Right.
So that's where I'd go for breakfast because I mean, honestly, you can make avocado toast at home, people, on your homemade sourdough now.
My homemade sourdough.
Homemade sourdough, yeah, would be nice. Yeah. How about you, Kylie? Where'd you go?
I would go to Room 10 because that's just my local, and I think just being around my community would probably be, you know, that's the thing that I miss right now is just like catching up with my friends and being able to support their businesses and just, you know, just that. I mean, like at the end of the day, the coffee or whatever, the food is almost secondary. You just like want to see those people because it's like part of your routine. So I really miss that. Lunch. Oh, I think I'd go to Langton Filling Station just because
I still do that.
Very delicious. And for dinner, I would drive across the border into Victoria because I could. I wouldn't have to quarantine. And I would want to go see one of my other friends. So I'd go to Laura in Point Leo Estate.
That is one of my
very good friends, and I've never been. And I think that dining at that level, I think, is going to, you know, with all the home cooking, which is fantastic, to have like a really bougie meal is like a thing that we can't do at home. So
I know.
That'd be quite nice. I think what will probably happen is restaurants won't all just open again on the same day. There'll be a trickle of who can afford to open and, you know, who's brave enough to open them and whatever else. But I want to get up at like 7 a.m, be at breakfast by 9 and eat out until midnight. That's my plan on day one.
Love it. Can I come?
Absolutely.
A day of gluttony, 24 hours of gluttonous eating. That's
all right. Next question. What advice? 24 hours.
What advice do you have for young or new operators in hospo in terms of what mindset to have? So there are a few folks that have just recently opened their sort of foray into the Filipino food. One being Janine Barasan over there in West Footscray, which unfortunately had to close down after just a couple of two weeks or so being open, or 3 weeks. What kind of advice would you give to those new entrepreneurs entering into the restaurant field that obviously has gotten a bit of a brick wall as a result of this crisis? What do you?
I would say budget is a really important thing. It sounds so basic, but I think that a lot of us who enter into the hospitality world do so because we have a love and passion for food, and we do, you know, that's our passion, and we tend to forget that it's a business. You know, I had a small business with my husband, and I also had the contrast of working for a really big company at the same time, and all those systems that we had in place were just something that we kind of threw caution to the wind, and we're like, we love like what we do, and you know, if we build it and we do it really well, people will come, and people did come. But you want to think about your business in terms of longevity, and it doesn't make sense to live day to day, and your passion will get you so far, but it'll also make you exhausted. So I think having a plan, having a long-term plan, being really sensible about what your finances are in reality and not, you know, best case scenario. Also think about worst case scenario, but really think of, you know, get other people involved in your business that aren't emotionally attached to it, because it's really easy, especially when you have a small business, to put everything into it and to not be able to see things from a perspective where you're looking at it purely from a business perspective. And you really do need those voices to help you make smart decisions along the way.
Yeah. And I think that's where maybe the likes of a Worksmith or a Grow Assembly can really help, right? Because you've got that community there and that base.
And I think the other thing is that people forget that at the best of times, the hospitality industry is really helpful, and it is a community. So, you know, don't be afraid if you see somebody who looks like they're staying afloat pretty well on Instagram or wherever. I think you can reach out to those people and those chefs, and, you know, everyone's in the same boat. And even though that's awful, you can take some sort of comfort in that. And they're likely to help you. They're likely to give you some advice because they've been in a similar position where they've needed advice.
Yeah.
That came up in that conversation that Open Table curated with Pat Norse being one of them, and Shane Dahlia and Sven, I can't say his last name, but where they mentioned, you know, ask around, because you're likely going to want to have that same template that someone's using to have that, to initiate that conversation and communication to their landlord to say, hey, can we negotiate what happens in these next few months? And you sort of like tapping away at your own computer, trying to create that template letter. It's probably floating around amongst your hospo friends already. So, one of the takeaways from that is don't ever be too proud to ask for help, because you are all in it together, and likely there are some that are probably already have accountants or lawyers that have already drafted these together that they're willing to share with you. So I thought that was a really amazing sort of takeaway from that, because, you know, you kind of want to just keep your head high and feel like, no, I got this, but realize sometimes you have to let that guard down and say, no, I don't have this. Can I have from others around me?
Yeah, going on Sophia's mantra, from eat curiously to learn curiously. And I think that's what we try to do in terms of promoting Filipino food to, I guess, mainstream Australians, is that, you know, are you curious about Filipino food? Come join us and connect with us and learn a bit more. We've got one more.
I don't think there's nothing more powerful than being vulnerable. And I think that's something that will hopefully extend beyond this time now as well. It's a real Western thing, I think, to be proud and, you know, not ask for help. And, you know, we're not raised with the same communities that Asian countries often are, where everybody chips in to prop someone else up. Everybody feels like they need to succeed on their own, or at least give the appearance of succeeding on your own. So to actually say, hey, you know, I'm stuck, I need help. There's nothing more relatable than that. And I think that it will help propel you forward. And I hope that people continue to do that even after this mess is over as well.
And we're seeing a lot of that in your posts as well, because obviously a lot of the folks here are reaching out to you to help you to amplify, I guess, what they're doing and share with your network. So one final question, I think, before we finish up. So once this is all over and we can travel overseas again, this is for both of you, what would be the top of your list to go to, and what would you eat?
Well, I was meant to be in Sicily in 2 months, so I'd love to go back there and eat brioche and granita for breakfast. I was also, so Sicily and South Korea were both big bucket list ones for me, and I had plans to go this year, so that's on hold. But because I'm insane, I actually really want to go to China now. I want to go straight there. I think it will be so interesting seeing how people are managing after, you know, being what is considered the epicenter of this virus. I think it's going to be a real struggle for them in terms of tourism for a long time, businesses as well. And there are just, so I've been to Shanghai before, but not beyond. And I'd love to explore more of China. I mean, we get a pretty diverse mix of food in Australia, especially Melbourne and Sydney. But God, I'd love to go and explore the different provinces there and eat more. And hopefully set an example for others who might want to go there as well, because they're going to have a really tough time.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Kylie?
I have to go to the fields. Like, I haven't been for maybe 12 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Since you
Luke, my
started in
husband's
hospital,
never
huh?
been.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the last time I was there, I was working at TET, so that was a while ago. Yeah, and my husband Luke's never been, so I think that it's time. We've been talking about going for so long.
Oh, and how did the dining experience with Margarita Flores when she came to Fire Door?
Oh,
did that just convince you, put you over the top?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, I love Filo food, and I mean, most of my family's here, so we're not kind of, you know, cut off from Filipino culture. I still feel so immersed in it, which is fantastic. But yeah, like, there's just nothing like going to the fields and practicing my Tagalog, because it's terrible.
Yeah,
I'll add the Philippines to my list as well. I haven't been. I'm the white wife who hasn't been. Yeah,
I already see this little this little group is already going to
go, weren't we? We were going to go.
I know.
We were going to go.
So yeah, that's fabulous. That's on our to do for sure, to do a culinary tour of the Philippines.
Oh, I'm there.
Each of us represent like a different regional area of the Philippines. Like me and Fideza from Luzon, the island Luzon. You know, Sandra, Sandra and Felice, they're from Visaya, and the Mindanaoan girls being from, you know, Maisie as well as Christina. So yeah, it's Visayan as well. Like, I think Maisie is also Visayan. So we've got all those regions covered amongst us. But in learning about the Filipino dishes that our parents and we make, we've realized how much diversity there is in the dishes. But go to those regional areas, you don't get that great appreciation, and it'd be fabulous to see it with the Philippines with a fresh set of eyes and new taste for different flavors that you otherwise don't get in your sort of provincial area that you're from. So
I'm so hungry.
Me too. Oh, me too.
So just to I'm just as well. Just maybe, do you guys have any sort of last words or that you'd like to share with the audience before we finish up? Any final thoughts?
No,
maybe. Okay.
I do. I just didn't want to be super eager like I always am. I would just say, yeah, there's definitely some, like, everybody is in the same boat for sure, regardless of whether you're a freelance creative in hospitality. This is completely unprecedented, but it is in some ways sort of the great leveler. I mean, it's easy to say that, sort of being, you know, middle class and white in Australia, but everyone is in this together. It is temporary, even though it's going to feel like a long time. And I think there's a lot to be said for really keeping focused on that light at the end of the tunnel. And if this is the tunnel and we're in it, we're all in it together. And there's plenty you can do in terms of staying connected to your community, supporting the businesses you care about, and just looking after yourself. But always looking forward, always looking forward, thinking about where you're going to eat when it opens, what you're going to have for takeout next week to support the restaurant you like, first place you're going to go within Australia to travel, first place you're going to go overseas, what you're excited to learn about, and then just work on those things in the meantime, because they'll just be that much better when you actually get to do them.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. You know, I think that we had a chat last week, and you know, those values of hospitality that we give so much to other people, like, it's time to apply that to ourselves. We give so much in our industry, and it's because it's what we love to do, but that can be incredibly taxing, and there's very little time to really take care of yourself and focus on yourself. So I think that, you know, being present and being mindful in this time is just so important, because that's what's going to get us through to the other side. And yeah, I just think that this is, as much as this is, you know, really difficult time, I truly believe that this is a gift. What we are going through right now is an incredible gift, and so much good is going to come out of it. And so I'm staying really positive and just trying to enjoy this time to do all the things that I've missed out on, and trying to see everything with new eyes, which has been
that's for sure.
And adopt a dog. Good time to adopt a pet.
Yeah, very true.
Does anyone want to adopt my kids?
Or a cat.
I don't want them for a while. They're doing my head in. Oh my gosh, I'm so surprised they haven't been knocking and charging into this door right now.
Well, I had Where's Wally, so that was all right, so we wrap
on
it up.
that note, ladies, I want to thank you on behalf of the entrepreneurs on really sort of being so generous with time as well as energy and insights, because it's without this, sometimes you fall astray about what it is that keeps us passionate about staying connected with our hospitality industry. And as much as we want to thank you, we also want to sort of like open up the doors to continue the conversations with us as you want, whether it's house party or on Zoom, we're always flexible. And also wanted to remind folks that this is the first of many that we hope to have in terms of this conversational series. Next week, we're lined up to actually have Jem Jacinto from Daily Greens and Finn Pokey, as well as Nicole Ponseca from New York. So she is the New York operative Jeepney restaurant. So to get a perspective of what's happening over there in New York, which unfortunately has become one of the centers for this crisis, and get a feel as to what's happening there and how she's reacting to it, both her as well as her team. And linking back up to the Australian hospitality industry through GEM. So I think that's really important to sort of show that we are all in it together through the global lens as much as the local lens as well.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Kylie and Sophia.
And where's your microphone? For Des, aren't you pass along?
Maybe the next. No, we'll do a Friday karaoke session at some point.
Oh, that.
Okay, yes, let's do it.
I would say to the girls, I've got like 2 magic mics. I've got a silver and a gold.
Oh, Waterfalls is ready to go.
Yeah, we'll get onto it.
We definitely will. We will. So, start adding those songs on your playlist and online karaoke.
We need a Panay
Entrepreneur, we will. I'm sure we will get onto it. But we are actually, just to finish off, I just wanted to also reach out to our audience to say that we also